On July 1, 1916, one of the most significant and tragic battles in history began, the Battle of the Somme. Over 100,000 British soldiers, many of whom were young and inexperienced volunteers from Kitchener's army, marched into a fierce and unforgiving fight on the Western Front. What followed was a brutal 12 hours that would change the course of World War I and leave a lasting mark on the world's understanding of warfare. Nearly 60,000 of those brave men were either killed or wounded in just half a day, making it one of the bloodiest days in British military history. This battle was meant to be a decisive offensive, a powerful push to break through the enemy lines and bring hope to the wary Allied forces. Instead, it became a stark reminder of the harsh realities of modern warfare, where technology and trench defenses combined to create a deadly environment that tested the limits of human endurance and spirit. The men who went over the top faced not only the enemy's guns but also the unforgiving terrain of no man's land, thick with barbed wire, deep mud, and countless unseen dangers. But beyond the staggering numbers and battlefield strategy lies a deeper story, one of courage, sacrifice, and the human cost of war. These volunteers, driven by a sense of duty and patriotism, stepped forward with hope and determination, often unaware of the horrors they would soon face. Their stories remind us that war is not just about tactics and victories, but about the real lives impacted, the families changed forever, and the lessons that must never be forgotten. In this video, we will explore what made the Battle of the Somme so devastating and why trench warfare remains one of the most traumatizing forms of fighting in history. From the brutal conditions in the trenches to the overwhelming challenges on the battlefield, we will uncover the truth behind the numbers and hear the voices of those who lived through it. If you find this history fascinating and want to learn more about the remarkable events and stories from the past, do not forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more engaging and thoughtful content to you every week. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Let us dive into the story of bravery, tragedy, and the harsh realities of the Battle of the Somme. At the dawn of World War I, there was a widespread belief among soldiers and civilians alike that the conflict would be short and decisive, a swift contest where victory could be achieved in mere months. The initial enthusiasm was palpable. Young men eagerly signed up to serve their countries, driven by patriotism and the hope of glory on the battlefield. Yet, as the war unfolded, the brutal truth quickly shattered these early hopes. The nature of warfare had changed irrevocably, and the battlefield was no longer the open fields where cavalry charges and rapid advances decided the fate of armies. Instead, it had transformed into a vast network of trenches, deep, muddy, and treacherous, that stretched for miles along the Western Front, locking soldiers in a deadly stalemate that would last for years. Trench warfare became the defining feature of this new kind of conflict. Soldiers found themselves entrenched in fortified positions, facing an enemy only yards away but separated by a dangerous expanse known as no man's land, riddled with barbed wire, shell craters, and the remains of those who had fallen before. The simple act of crossing this desolate zone could mean certain death, as machine guns and artillery relentlessly swept the battlefield. These trenches, far from being safe havens, were places of unimaginable hardship. Men endured freezing cold winters and sweltering summers, soaked through with rain and mud, often standing knee-deep in water for days on end. The smell of decay from decomposing bodies mingled with the stench of unwashed soldiers. While disease spread rapidly in these unsanitary conditions, the constant threat of sudden bombardments left soldiers in a state of perpetual fear and exhaustion. As the months wore on, the early optimism for swift victory faded into grim resignation. The generals on both sides struggled to find ways to break the deadlock, but every offensive seemed to come at a terrible cost with little to show for it. The Battle of the Somme, launched in July 1916, was one such attempt, a massive coordinated attack meant to overwhelm German defenses and turn the tide of the war. However, the reality was starkly different from the hopeful plans. The heavy artillery bombardment designed to destroy enemy trenches often fell short, failing to cut through the thick, barbed wire or collapse the deep dugouts where German soldiers took shelter. When the whistle blew to signal the infantry advance, waves of British troops emerged from their trenches, moving slowly and steadily across no man's land, only to be met with a deadly hail of machine gun fire. The results were catastrophic. Thousands of men fell within minutes, cut down by the very weapons meant to secure their advance. For many soldiers, the initial charge into battle was their first experience of combat, and the shock of such sudden, relentless violence left deep psychological scars. It was a cruel awakening to the brutal realities of modern industrial warfare, where individual acts of bravery were often overwhelmed by the sheer destructive power of technology. The Somme became a symbol of the futility and horror of trench warfare, an endless cycle of attack and defense that ground down armies and shattered lives without delivering decisive victory. Yet, despite the staggering losses, the soldiers persevered. They endured the mud, the cold, the noise of incessant shelling, and the constant presence of death around them. Letters home described not just the danger but also the camaraderie and resilience among the men. These personal stories, full of courage and heartbreak, remind us that beyond the statistics and strategies, it was human beings, young men torn from their homes and thrust into unimaginable circumstances, who bore the true cost of this war. The stalemate on the Western Front was a grim testament to the limits of military tactics of the time. Neither side could easily break through the other's defenses, and each attack led to horrific casualties that sapped morale and drained resources. The war became a prolonged test of endurance, a grinding battle of attrition that demanded new approaches and innovations. The first use of tanks in 1916, though limited and imperfect, hinted at the changing face of warfare, where technology would begin to reshape the battlefield once again. This prolonged stalemate and the enormous human toll also had profound effects on the societies involved. Back home, families grappled with the news of lost sons, brothers, and fathers, while the realities of total war touched every aspect of life. The initial patriotic fervor gave way to a somber awareness of the war's true cost. Governments struggled to maintain support for the war effort as casualty lists grew and the prospects of victory seemed ever more distant. In this context, the Battle of the Somme stands not only as a story of loss and suffering, but also as a crucial turning point in the history of warfare. It forced military leaders and governments to confront the harsh realities of industrial-scale conflict and spurred efforts to rethink strategies, technology, and the treatment of soldiers. More than anything, it serves as a powerful reminder of the human price of war, a price paid in blood, courage, and sacrifice on the muddy fields of the Western Front. As we explore the events of the Somme and the era of trench warfare, it is essential to remember the individuals who lived through this experience, their hopes, fears, and unyielding spirit amid the darkest hours of the 20th century's most devastating conflict. Their stories deserve to be told with honesty and respect, helping us understand not only the past but also the enduring lessons for peace and humanity. If you find this story compelling and want to dive deeper into the realities of history's most challenging battles, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support allows us to continue sharing these important stories, bringing history to life with insight and care. Don't forget to click the notification bell to stay updated on our latest content as we journey through the remarkable and often painful chapters of our past. In the early months of 1916, as the world was already scarred by the relentless horrors of the Great War, the small fortress city of Verdun in northeastern France became the epicenter of one of the most intense and harrowing battles in military history. The Battle of Verdun, which stretched from February to June, was not just a clash of armies but a brutal test of endurance, willpower, and national spirit. It was a German offensive aimed at breaking the French forces and sapping their resolve through sheer attrition. And its consequences were staggering: over 600,000 combined casualties and a profound strain on French morale. Verdun was chosen by the German High Command for its symbolic and strategic importance. To them, capturing this historic fortress would deal a devastating blow to France, both militarily and psychologically. For the French, Verdun was more than just a position on the map. It was a symbol of resistance, a bastion that had withstood countless sieges throughout history. The battle that unfolded was one of the longest and most grueling of the war, characterized by relentless artillery bombardments, close quarters combat, and a determination to hold ground at any cost. From the moment the first German shells began raining down on Verdun on February 21st, the battle escalated into a grinding war of attrition. The city and its surrounding forts were bombarded almost daily, with massive artillery barrages that tore the landscape apart and forced soldiers into deep dugouts and tunnels to survive. The thunderous roar of shellfire became the soundtrack of life and death for those caught in the crossfire. The French defenders, often outnumbered and exhausted, responded with fierce tenacity. They understood that losing Verdun could mean the collapse of French morale and potentially the entire war effort. As weeks turned into months, the fighting showed no signs of letting up. The battlefields became scenes of unimaginable devastation: forests flattened by artillery, villages reduced to rubble, and trenches filled with mud, blood, and the fallen. Both sides suffered heavily. The French endured over 315,000 casualties, while the Germans lost nearly 280,000 men. Each day brought new waves of soldiers to replace the wounded and dead, yet the lines barely shifted. The scale of human suffering was staggering, and the toll was not only physical but deeply psychological. French soldiers, many of whom were veterans of previous battles, displayed extraordinary resilience. The phrase "they shall not pass" became a rallying cry, embodying the fierce determination to hold Verdun no matter the cost. The city's defenders were rotated frequently to prevent exhaustion, but even so, the relentless shelling, harsh conditions, and constant threat of death wore down even the strongest. In the trenches, men faced not only the enemy's fire but the cold, hunger, disease, and the haunting presence of death that surrounded them. Letters home spoke of the camaraderie that sustained them, but also of the fear and despair that shadowed each day. The battle's scale and intensity also took a heavy toll on the French public and leadership. As casualty reports mounted, the initial enthusiasm for the war began to fade, replaced by growing anxiety and sorrow. The government and military command struggled to maintain support for the defense of Verdun, knowing that the city's fall would have catastrophic consequences. Yet, the refusal to abandon Verdun became a symbol of national pride and unity, a testament to France's unyielding spirit in the face of overwhelming odds. Strategically, Verdun was a focal point in the larger context of the war. The German offensive was intended to draw French resources and attention away from other fronts, weakening their overall position. This strategy forced the Allies, particularly the British, to plan offensives elsewhere to relieve the pressure on the French. The eventual launch of the Battle of the Somme by the British in July 1916 was partly motivated by the need to ease the strain on Verdun and prevent the German army from breaking through. Despite the relentless fighting and staggering losses, Verdun did not fall. The battle ended with French forces holding their ground, but the cost was immense. The landscape bore the scars of months of destruction, and the soldiers who survived carried the invisible wounds of trauma and loss. Verdun became a powerful symbol of sacrifice and resilience, a reminder of the devastating price paid for freedom and the horrors of industrialized warfare. The lessons of Verdun echoed far beyond the battlefield. It exposed the limits of traditional military tactics when faced with modern weaponry and fortified positions. The battle highlighted the importance of morale, logistics, and medical care in sustaining armies through prolonged conflict. It also brought to light the psychological toll of war, as countless soldiers suffered from what was then called shell shock, a condition we now recognize as post-traumatic stress disorder. As we reflect on Verdun, we must remember the individuals behind the numbers, the young men who endured months of relentless bombardment, the commanders who made impossible decisions, and the civilians caught in the crossfire. Their stories of courage and suffering deepen our understanding of the First World War and its enduring impact on history. If you want to learn more about the incredible stories and history behind Verdun and other pivotal moments of the Great War, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing these important narratives with respect and insight. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you won't miss any future content as we explore the human stories behind history's most defining battles. By mid-1916, the relentless Battle of Verdun had pushed the French forces to their limits. The seemingly unbreakable German offensive was draining French manpower and morale, threatening not just the fortress city but the entire Allied war effort. Recognizing the dire situation, the British and French high commands knew that decisive action was needed to ease the burden on Verdun and shift the momentum of the war. It was in this context that the Somme offensive was conceived, a massive joint operation that would involve one of the largest artillery bombardments ever attempted. Designed to break through German lines and relieve pressure on the French defenders. The planning for the Somme offensive was meticulous and ambitious. Military leaders envisioned a powerful artillery barrage that would pound German trenches and defenses into ruins, softening the way for the infantry to advance with minimal resistance. The hope was that this relentless shelling would destroy barbed wire obstacles, eliminate machine gun nests, and cripple enemy morale. Behind the scenes, entire divisions of artillery guns were amassed, some brought from great distances, while thousands of soldiers prepared for what was expected to be a swift and decisive breakthrough. As the days approached, the anticipation among the troops was mixed with nervous excitement and a grim awareness of the stakes involved. For many British soldiers, particularly those in Kitchener's new army composed of enthusiastic volunteers, this was their first real taste of the horrors that modern warfare could bring. They trained for months, drilled in coordination, and rehearsed their roles with the hope that their sacrifices would help turn the tide. The plan called for a carefully timed sequence. Days of continuous bombardment followed by a coordinated infantry assault, where waves of soldiers would go over the top and advance across no man's land to seize enemy positions. When the offensive finally began on July 1, 1916, the initial artillery barrage was intense and unrelenting. For 7 long days, the guns roared continuously, sending thousands of shells crashing into German trenches, aiming to tear apart fortifications and disrupt enemy defenses. The ground trembled under the barrage, and the sky was thick with smoke and dust. The soldiers in the trenches below experienced a mixture of hope and dread, praying that the shelling would do its job and that their advance would be met with little resistance. However, the reality on the ground proved far more complicated. German forces had prepared deeply dug and well-fortified shelters that allowed many defenders to survive the bombardment relatively unscathed. These dugouts, some reinforced with concrete and extending dozens of feet underground, provided critical protection from the artillery's devastating power. When the British infantry climbed out of their trenches and moved forward across no man's land, they were met with fierce resistance from German machine guns and rifle fire. Barbed wire defenses, which the artillery had failed to destroy completely, caught many soldiers and left them exposed to enemy fire. The result was a devastating and tragic loss of life. In the opening hours alone, British forces suffered nearly 60,000 casualties, with around 20,000 men killed. Entire units were wiped out, including many of the new volunteer battalions who had never faced battle before. The sheer scale of the losses shocked the world and starkly revealed the deadly challenges of trench warfare. It became painfully clear that the artillery bombardment, despite its intensity, had not achieved the level of destruction that planners had hoped for. Despite this, the Somme offensive was not without significance. It did succeed in drawing German forces away from Verdun, providing some relief to the French defenders who had been enduring months of constant pressure. The battle also forced the Germans to commit more troops and resources to the Western Front, preventing them from focusing entirely on Verdun or other areas. Over time, the Somme became a grinding battle of attrition, with both sides suffering enormous casualties as they fought for small gains of territory. The Somme also highlighted the need for new tactics and technologies to break the deadlock of trench warfare. Lessons learned from the initial failures prompted changes in artillery coordination, infantry tactics, and the eventual introduction of tanks in later stages of the battle. Commanders realized that the war was no longer about bold charges alone but required careful planning, combined arms coordination, and innovations to overcome entrenched defenses. For the soldiers on the ground, the battle was a harrowing ordeal. They faced not only the physical dangers of gunfire and shelling but also the mental and emotional strain of fighting in muddy, disease-ridden trenches, often under constant bombardment. Letters and diaries from the time reveal moments of fear, hope, camaraderie, and exhaustion, painting a vivid picture of the human experience amid the machinery of war. The Somme offensive, while costly and marked by tragedy, became a symbol of both the futility and endurance of those who fought. It underscored the harsh realities of modern industrial warfare and the enormous sacrifices made by ordinary men in extraordinary circumstances. Above all, it reminds us that behind the numbers and strategies were real people, soldiers who faced unimaginable dangers and whose courage and resilience continue to inspire. As we explore the story of the Somme and its role in relieving Verdun, it is essential to remember the complexity of the battle and the profound impact it had on the course of World War I. If you find this story compelling and want to uncover more about the bravery and struggles of those who lived through these historic events, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring these important histories to life and ensures you won't miss any future explorations of the past. Don't forget to hit the notification bell and join us as we continue to dive deep into the stories that shaped our world. As the plans for the Somme offensive took shape, British commanders were filled with a mixture of determination and optimism. Years of stalemate had bred frustration, but there was a strong belief among the military leadership that this time, the carefully coordinated artillery bombardment would pave the way for a decisive breakthrough. They trusted that the relentless shelling would obliterate German defenses, cutting barbed wire, destroying machine gun nests, and forcing the enemy from their trenches. This confidence was not unfounded. Artillery had already transformed warfare, and the sheer volume of firepower amassed for the Somme was unprecedented. Yet, this optimism masked a critical underestimation of the enemy's preparedness and resilience. The Germans had learned hard lessons from years of fighting and adapted their defensive strategies accordingly. Instead of relying solely on surface trenches vulnerable to bombardment, they developed deep, intricate networks of dugouts and shelters, some reinforced with concrete and extending dozens of feet underground. These dugouts were designed to protect soldiers from the punishing artillery fire that had so often devastated the front lines. The German troops could shelter during the heaviest shelling, emerging only when the bombardment ceased to man their positions and prepare for counterattacks. This system of deep defense meant that while the British guns might churn the surface into a wasteland, many of the defenders remained intact and ready to fight. On the morning of July 1, 1916, When the long-anticipated artillery barrage fell silent, the British infantry prepared to advance across no man's land. They had been told the enemy defences would be shattered, that the barbed wire would be cut, and the German troops either dead or disoriented. But as the soldiers climbed out of their trenches, it became horrifyingly clear that reality was very different. The barbed wire was often still intact, tangled and deadly, and as the British men moved forward, German machine gunners emerged from their deep dugouts, well rested and ready to unleash a devastating hail of bullets. What followed was a brutal and tragic scene. The machine guns, positioned on higher ground or in fortified bunkers, swept the advancing waves of British soldiers with deadly efficiency. Entire battalions were cut down in minutes, their hopes of a swift victory replaced by the horror of sudden, overwhelming fire. The sheltered German defenders, who had survived the bombardment largely unscathed, now exacted a terrible price on the attackers. The battlefield became a deadly trap where courage and sacrifice collided with the brutal mechanics of modern war. This miscalculation by British commanders was not simply a failure of intelligence or planning. It reflected the immense challenges faced by armies adapting to new forms of warfare. The First World War was a conflict unlike any before it, where traditional tactics clashed with industrialized weaponry. The belief that artillery alone could break the enemy's line underestimated the depth and sophistication of German fortifications, as well as the resilience of the men defending them. The consequences of this overconfidence were devastating. The first day of the Somme offensive remains one of the bloodiest in British military history, with nearly 60,000 casualties. Many soldiers who went over the top that day were young volunteers, inexperienced but full of hope and determination. Their sacrifice exposed the harsh truth that artillery, no matter how powerful, could not guarantee an easy victory against an enemy prepared to endure and fight back from beneath the earth. Despite the tragic losses, the battle also forced military leaders to reconsider their strategies and learn critical lessons. The failures of the initial artillery barrage led to improvements in targeting, timing, and coordination between artillery and infantry. Innovations such as creeping barrages, where artillery fire moved forward just ahead of advancing troops, were developed to provide better protection and support. The battle also highlighted the need for new technologies, including tanks, which would later play a crucial role in overcoming entrenched defenses. The Somme offensive, with all its tragedy and hardship, revealed the complex reality of modern warfare, a brutal contest of firepower, fortification, and human will. It underscored how armies must continuously adapt to the evolving nature of conflict, and how victory often comes at an unimaginable cost. The men who fought that day endured conditions that tested their physical and mental limits, standing as a testament to courage in the face of overwhelming odds. Reflecting on the events of the Somme, it is essential to remember not only the strategic failures and tactical lessons, but the human stories beneath the battlefield. The soldiers, many of whom were volunteers from towns and villages across Britain, faced a terrifying reality far from the glory they had imagined. Their experiences remind us that history is shaped by real people, whose bravery and sacrifice deserve our respect and remembrance. If this story of courage and the harsh lessons of war resonates with you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. By supporting us, you help keep these important histories alive and ensure that the sacrifices of those who fought are never forgotten. Don't forget to click the notification bell to stay updated on our future explorations into the defining moments of history. Together, we can honor the past and learn from it for a better future. On the morning of July 1st, 1916, as the sun rose over the battle-scarred fields of the Somme, thousands of British infantry soldiers prepared for what many hoped would be a decisive moment in the Great War. The weeks of intense artillery bombardment had finally ceased, and the men were ordered to climb out of their trenches and advance across no man's land toward the German lines. There was a tense mixture of anticipation and fear among the troops as they fixed their bayonets and readied themselves for the assault. Many were young volunteers, new to the horrors of war but driven by patriotism and a sense of duty. What awaited them, however, was a nightmare that would become etched in history as one of the bloodiest and most tragic days ever fought by the British Army. The terrain ahead was a deadly obstacle course. Thick belts of barbed wire stretched across the open ground, intended to slow down and entangle advancing soldiers. This wire was supposed to have been shredded by the weeks-long artillery barrage, but in many places it remained largely intact, a tangled mess that trapped men and made them vulnerable to enemy fire. As the infantry moved forward, the ground was also pocked with shell craters filled with water and mud, turning the advance into a grueling and exhausting struggle before even facing the enemy's defensive positions. What made the situation far worse was the German defenders' strategic advantage. Many had sheltered in deep, fortified dugouts during the bombardment and were now emerging to man their machine guns and rifles. Positioned on higher ground and with clear fields of fire, the German soldiers were ready to unleash a torrent of bullets on the advancing British ranks. Machine guns, deadly in their efficiency, swept across the battlefield with devastating effect, cutting down waves of soldiers before they could reach the trenches. The scene was one of chaos and horror. Entire companies of men were mowed down in moments, their bodies falling into no man's land or tangled in the barbed wire. Officers and non-commissioned officers tried desperately to rally their troops, but the firepower they faced was overwhelming. The sheer volume of casualties left many units in disarray, with soldiers stranded in exposed positions or forced to take cover in shell holes, hoping to survive until they could retreat or receive reinforcements. Among the thousands who fell that day were volunteers who had never experienced combat before. Their bravery in the face of impossible odds stands as a poignant reminder of the human cost of war. Many of these men had enlisted with dreams of glory, only to be met with the grim reality of machine gun fire and mud-soaked trenches. Their letters and diaries tell of fear, hope, and camaraderie amid the relentless violence. Some witnessed friends fall beside them. Others found moments of quiet courage in the storm of battle. The catastrophic losses on July 1st were a harsh shock to Britain and the world. Nearly 60,000 casualties were recorded, including around 20,000 deaths, making it the deadliest day in British military history. The magnitude of the loss shook public confidence and raised painful questions about the strategy and planning behind the offensive. Yet, amidst the tragedy, acts of heroism and sacrifice shone through soldiers who risked everything to help wounded comrades or press forward despite the odds. Despite the initial disaster, the battle did not end there. The Somme offensive continued for months, evolving into a grueling war of attrition. The British Army adapted tactics, improved coordination between artillery and infantry, and gradually learned how to deal with the challenges posed by entrenched defenses. The introduction of tanks and new artillery techniques eventually helped to break some of the stalemates, but the cost remained painfully high. The events of July 1st, 1916, reveal the brutal reality of World War I, how new technology and warfare methods transformed the battlefield into a place of unimaginable danger and suffering. The day stands as a testament to the courage and endurance of those who fought and fell, and a sobering reminder of the devastating price of war. Their sacrifice paved the way for future military innovations and shaped the course of the conflict in profound ways. As we reflect on the tragedy and heroism of that day, it is essential to remember the individuals behind the statistics, the young men from towns and villages across Britain who faced the horrors of no man's land with determination and bravery. Their stories deserve to be told and honored, reminding us of the human faces behind history's most significant battles. If you want to explore more stories of courage and learn about the profound impact of the Battle of the Somme, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing these important histories with respect and depth. Don't forget to click the notification bell to stay updated on future videos as we journey through the pivotal moments that shaped our world. Among the many stories of courage and tragedy that emerged from the Battle of the Somme, the fate of the Tyneside Irish Brigade stands out as a poignant example of heroic determination met with devastating loss. Formed largely from volunteers in the Newcastle area and surrounding towns, the brigade was composed of men bound not only by a sense of duty but also by deep cultural and community ties. These soldiers marched into battle together, filled with pride and the hope of making a decisive contribution to the war effort. Yet, their experience on July 1, 1916, would become a heartbreaking testament to the brutal realities of trench warfare. The Tyneside Irish Brigade was assigned to attack a heavily fortified section of the German defences near Le Boisel, a village that had already become synonymous with intense fighting. As the morning mist lifted, the brigade prepared to advance over open, exposed ground that offered little to no cover. The plan called for them to cross no man's land and breach the enemy's positions, a task that required extraordinary courage given the deadly obstacles ahead. Thick belts of barbed wire were intended to slow or trap any attackers, while German machine guns and riflemen lay in wait, ready to unleash a storm of fire on the advancing troops. Despite the overwhelming dangers, the men of the Tyneside Irish Brigade moved forward in disciplined waves, their steps steady but hearts heavy with the weight of what lay ahead. As they crossed the open slopes, they were met by a relentless barrage of machine gun fire. The defenders, protected in deep dugouts during the preceding artillery bombardment, had emerged ready to defend their ground with ruthless efficiency. The sheer volume of enemy fire tore through the ranks of the brigade, cutting down hundreds of men in moments. Those who reached the barbed wire often found themselves entangled and pinned, unable to move as bullets rained down upon them. The tragic losses were staggering. The brigade suffered some of the highest casualty rates of any unit on that day, with many of its men killed or wounded before they could even reach the enemy trenches. Entire companies were decimated, and the once confident waves of soldiers were reduced to small pockets of survivors struggling to hold on amid the chaos. The battlefield around Le Boisel became a scene of immense sorrow, where the bravery of the Tyneside Irish was met with the grim reality of modern industrial warfare. Yet, amidst the devastation, stories of extraordinary heroism emerged. Soldiers showed selflessness and determination, risking their lives to aid wounded comrades or press forward despite overwhelming odds. The Tyneside Irish Brigade's charge exemplified not only the futility of many assaults during the Somme, but also the unyielding spirit of those who fought. Their sacrifice embodied the deep sense of loyalty and courage that characterized so many units during the war, even in the face of near-certain death. The experience of the Tyneside Irish also highlights the complex nature of World War I battles, where tactical plans often clashed with harsh realities on the ground. The British High Command had hoped that the prolonged artillery bombardment would neutralize enemy defenses, making the infantry advance more successful. However, the resilience and preparation of German troops, along with difficult terrain and inadequate artillery impact, turned many attacks into tragic exercises in attrition. The Tyneside Irish Brigade's story is one of countless examples where bravery alone could not overcome the deadly combination of machine guns, barbed wire, and entrenched positions. The heavy losses suffered by the brigade had a profound impact back home as well. Many towns and villages mourned the loss of their young men, who had volunteered together and returned as casualties or not at all. The shared grief forged a collective memory that endured long after the guns fell silent. Monuments and memorials now stand to honor the Tyneside Irish and all those who paid the ultimate price, serving as lasting reminders of the human cost of war. The lessons drawn from the brigade's experience influenced future military tactics and the continuing evolution of the war. Commanders learned the importance of better artillery coordination, improved intelligence on enemy positions, and the need for new technologies such as tanks to break through fortified lines. While the Somme remained a battle of attrition, the sacrifices of units like the Tyneside Irish helped to shape strategies that would eventually contribute to the Allied victory. Reflecting on the Tyneside Irish Brigade's charge, it is crucial to remember the individuals who fought and fell not just as numbers or statistics, but as men with hopes, families, and stories. Their courage in the face of overwhelming odds remains a powerful symbol of the human spirit during one of history's darkest chapters. Their legacy continues to inspire remembrance and respect for all those who endured the horrors of the Somme and World War I. If you find the story of the Tyneside Irish Brigade moving and want to learn more about the extraordinary courage and sacrifices of soldiers in World War I, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share these vital histories with depth and care. Don't forget to hit the notification bell to stay updated on our future explorations of the past's defining moments. Together, we honor those who shaped history through their bravery and resilience. Life in the trenches during the Battle of the Somme was a relentless ordeal that tested the physical endurance and mental resilience of every soldier who endured it. Far from the romanticized notions of warfare, the reality was grim and unforgiving. Soldiers found themselves trapped in narrow, muddy ditches dug deep into the earth, where every day brought new challenges that wore down even the strongest men. The trenches were not just battle lines but harsh living environments that exposed soldiers to constant danger and deprivation. The mud was one of the most persistent and insidious enemies. After rain or shelling, the trenches turned into quagmires of thick, sticky sludge that clung to boots and equipment, making every movement exhausting and slow. Men often found themselves knee-deep or worse, struggling to keep their footing as they carried heavy packs and weapons. The mud was more than just a nuisance. It could trap soldiers, making retreat or movement nearly impossible, and in some cases contributed to drowning or fatal exhaustion. It also soaked clothing and gear, leading to constant discomfort and increasing the risk of illness. Cold and wet conditions were a constant companion. Exposure to rain, wind, and freezing temperatures, especially during the long months of the campaign, left many soldiers shivering and vulnerable. Without proper shelter or warm clothing, men suffered from hypothermia and frostbite, ailments that could be as deadly as enemy fire. The trenches provided little protection from the elements, and nights were often spent huddled in cramped, damp dugouts or shell holes, trying to find any measure of warmth and rest. Disease thrived in the unsanitary conditions of the trenches. The lack of proper sanitation, combined with overcrowding and the presence of rats and lice, created a breeding ground for illness. Trench foot, a painful and potentially deadly condition caused by prolonged exposure to damp and cold, afflicted thousands, leading to infections and, in severe cases, amputation. Respiratory infections, dysentery, and other ailments spread rapidly among the men, weakening their ability to fight and survive. Medical care was often rudimentary, and the constant movement of wounded soldiers to field hospitals strained the limited resources available. Food and water were scarce and often of poor quality. Soldiers subsisted on a diet that primarily consisted of hard biscuits, canned bully beef, and limited fresh rations. Hot meals were rare, and the monotony of the diet contributed to malnutrition and lowered morale. Access to clean drinking water was a constant challenge. Many had to rely on water collected in shell craters or rainwater, which was often contaminated. Thirst and hunger added to the daily hardships, sapping the strength and spirit of men already pushed to their limits. Beyond these environmental hardships, the ever-present threat of artillery bombardments and sniper fire created a sense of constant peril. The sudden roar of shells exploding nearby could send men diving for cover at any moment, shattering any hope of peace or rest. Snipers lurked in concealed positions, picking off soldiers as they moved along the trenches or crossed open ground. The psychological strain of waiting for an attack, never knowing when the next burst of violence would come, left many men battle-weary and anxious. Amid this brutal existence, soldiers developed coping mechanisms and camaraderie to endure the hardships. Letters home, shared stories, and small acts of kindness helped maintain morale. Yet, the physical and emotional toll was immense, with many men suffering from what was then called shell shock, now recognized as post-traumatic stress disorder. The continuous exposure to death, injury, and fear eroded mental health and left scars that lasted long after the guns fell silent. The trench experience was a defining feature of World War I and profoundly shaped the nature of the conflict. It forced armies to rethink strategies and tactics, highlighting the need for technological innovation and better logistical support. More importantly, it exposed the human cost of industrialized warfare, where soldiers were caught in a deadly limbo between front-line combat and harsh living conditions. As we remember the Battle of the Somme and the sacrifices made by those who fought there, it is essential to understand the full scope of what they endured, not just the battles themselves, but the daily struggle to survive in the trenches. Their resilience in the face of mud, cold, disease, hunger, and constant threat speaks to a remarkable strength of spirit and commitment to their duty and comrades. If you want to honor these soldiers and learn more about their incredible stories of endurance and courage, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share these important histories with care and respect. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you won't miss our future videos exploring the human side of history's most challenging conflicts. Together, we keep their legacy alive. The relentless grind of trench warfare did not only break soldiers' bodies, it shattered their minds as well. Psychological trauma was an invisible enemy that crept into the ranks with devastating effect, haunting soldiers long after the guns fell silent. The term shell shock entered the military lexicon during World War I, describing the mental and emotional toll that constant bombardment, fear, and death inflicted on the men fighting in the trenches. Unlike physical wounds, these psychological injuries were harder to understand and even harder to treat. Yet their impact on morale and combat effectiveness was profound. Soldiers on the Somme faced conditions that no one could have truly prepared them for. The thunderous roar of artillery shells exploding around them was a terrifying backdrop to daily life. This incessant noise was more than just a nuisance. It triggered intense fear and anxiety that wore away at their mental resilience. The unpredictability of attacks meant that men never knew when the next shell would land nearby, or whether a sniper's bullet might find them as they moved between trenches. Over time, this constant state of alertness and dread took an enormous psychological toll. Men suffering from shell shock exhibited a wide range of symptoms. Some became paralyzed with fear or unable to speak, while others experienced uncontrollable shaking, nightmares, or severe fatigue. The stress could manifest physically in ways that mimicked neurological damage, confusing medical staff and commanders alike. Many were labeled as cowards or malingerers by officers who failed to understand the nature of this mental breakdown. Tragically, some soldiers were punished or sent back to the front lines despite their obvious distress, adding to the suffering and stigma surrounding psychological trauma. The story of the Battle of the Somme is full of heartbreaking accounts from soldiers who endured these invisible wounds. Letters home reveal men struggling with insomnia and nightmares, haunted by the faces of fallen comrades and the horrors they witnessed. Diaries describe moments when men felt detached from reality, unable to reconcile the violence surrounding them with the person they once were. The shared experience of trauma bonded many soldiers, but it also isolated those whose symptoms became severe, pushing them to the edges of their units and even society. Medical officers and psychologists of the time began to recognize shell shock as a real condition. though treatments were still primitive and often ineffective. Rest and removal from the front lines helped some recover, but others carried the burden for years or for life. The psychological wounds of the Somme echoed long after the battlefield had quieted, affecting veterans' post-war lives and their families. The war's mental scars revealed the true cost of modern warfare, not just in lives lost, but in shattered minds. The impact of psychological trauma also affected combat effectiveness. Soldiers weakened by fear and exhaustion were less able to carry out orders or respond to sudden danger. Entire units could become paralyzed by panic or disorganization in the heat of battle, complicating military strategies and prolonging conflicts. Commanders learned the importance of mental health support and the need to rotate troops out of frontline service, lessons that influence military practices in later wars. Understanding the psychological toll of the Somme also deepens our appreciation for the bravery and resilience of the men who fought there. Despite the mental strain, countless soldiers pushed forward, motivated by loyalty to their comrades, a sense of duty, or the hope that their sacrifices would bring an end to the conflict. Their courage was not only in facing enemy fire, but in enduring the invisible battles within themselves. As we reflect on the human cost of the Battle of the Somme, it is vital to remember the stories of those who suffered psychological trauma alongside physical wounds. Their experiences broaden our understanding of war's true impact and remind us of the importance of mental health care for soldiers both past and present. The lessons learned from the Somme have helped shape how armies address psychological resilience today, honoring the sacrifices of those who bore the heaviest burdens. If you want to learn more about the human stories behind the Battle of the Somme and the lasting effects of war trauma, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support allows us to share these vital histories with the respect and depth they deserve. Don't forget to click the notification bell to stay updated on our future videos exploring the full spectrum of wartime experiences. Together, we keep the memory of these brave soldiers alive and honor their enduring legacy. The dawn of July 1st, 1916, was filled with hope and anticipation as British forces launched one of the most ambitious offensives of the First World War, the Battle of the Somme. Yet, despite the meticulous planning, enormous manpower, and overwhelming artillery preparation, the initial phase of the Somme offensive painfully revealed the brutal realities of trench warfare. Colossal human sacrifice met with minimal territorial gain. This grim outcome would forever etch the Somme into history as a tragic symbol of futile slaughter and shattered optimism. As the British soldiers climbed out of their trenches and advanced across no man's land, the battlefield quickly turned into a scene of chaos and carnage. The plan hinged on the belief that weeks of relentless artillery bombardment would have obliterated German defenses, leaving the enemy vulnerable and disorganized. Commanders envisioned a swift breakthrough, with infantry units sweeping forward across shattered terrain to seize key positions. Yet, this vision soon collided with harsh truth. German troops, protected in deep, reinforced dugouts, had survived the bombardment relatively unscathed and were ready to unleash deadly machine gun fire the moment the attack began. The initial hours of the battle were a harrowing ordeal. Waves of British infantry emerged from their trenches, advancing under a hail of bullets and artillery shells, only to be cut down before reaching the enemy lines. Barbed wire entanglements remained largely intact, ensnaring soldiers as they tried to push forward. The landscape was quickly transformed into a bloody graveyard, strewn with bodies of young men who had volunteered with hope but met a brutal and premature end. Entire battalions suffered catastrophic losses, their ranks shattered before they could achieve their objectives. Despite these immense sacrifices, the territorial gains on that first day were negligible. The British Fourth Army managed to capture only a few miles of ground, and many attacks faltered completely. The costly advances did little to disrupt German defensive systems or provide a decisive strategic advantage. The sheer scale of casualties, nearly 60,000 British soldiers wounded or killed, overshadowed any limited progress made on the battlefield. News of the devastation spread quickly, shocking the public and challenging the initial optimism surrounding the offensive. The failure to secure significant gains was not due to a lack of courage or determination among the soldiers, but stemmed from a combination of factors. The German defenses were stronger and more resilient than anticipated, with deep dugouts, well-maintained barbed wire, and expertly placed machine gun nests. The artillery bombardment, though massive, failed to destroy key enemy positions or wire defenses comprehensively. Moreover, the coordination between artillery and infantry was often inadequate, leaving troops exposed at critical moments. This sobering reality forced a reckoning among British military leadership. The Somme became a painful lesson in the limits of frontal assaults against well-prepared defenses in the era of modern weaponry. Commanders began to reassess tactics, recognizing the need for improved artillery targeting, better communication, and more flexible strategies that could adapt to the changing dynamics of the battlefield. The introduction of new technologies, including tanks, was inspired in part by the challenges exposed during the early days of the Somme. At the human level, the initial phase of the battle left deep scars on the soldiers who survived and on the communities they represented. The losses were felt across Britain and the Empire, as families mourned sons, brothers, and fathers who would never return. The shared trauma bound those left behind in a collective grief, underscoring the immense cost of war. Yet, amidst the sorrow, stories of individual bravery and sacrifice shone through, reminding us of the courage displayed even when faced with overwhelming odds. In the months that followed, the battle continued with relentless intensity, and while the front lines shifted only slightly, the Somme became a grinding test of endurance and resolve. The initial failure to achieve quick success set the tone for a prolonged conflict characterized by attrition and hardship. Still, the lessons learned during those first crucial hours helped shape future operations and contributed to the eventual Allied victory. As we reflect on the initial phase of the Somme, it is vital to understand both the scale of the sacrifice and the strategic challenges faced. The story of this battle is not just one of failure, but also of human resilience and the painful evolution of warfare. It reminds us that behind every advance or retreat on the map lies the experience of countless individuals who endured unimaginable hardships. If you want to explore more about the Battle of the Somme and the profound stories of those who fought and sacrificed, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support enables us to bring these important histories to life with the depth and respect they deserve. Be sure to hit the notification bell to stay updated on our future videos, where we continue to uncover the human stories behind history's defining moments. Together, we honor the memory and legacy of those who shaped our world. The Battle of the Somme, while marked by staggering losses and limited territorial gains, ultimately served as a harsh but invaluable teacher for the Allied forces, exposing critical tactical flaws and inspiring a wave of military innovation that would reshape modern warfare. In the brutal crucible of the Somme, commanders and soldiers alike learned lessons about the nature of industrialized conflict, lessons that demanded adaptation and ingenuity to overcome the deadly stalemate of trench warfare. From the outset, the battle revealed the shortcomings of traditional military tactics in the face of entrenched, well-prepared defenders equipped with machine guns, artillery, and deep underground shelters. The early belief that a prolonged artillery bombardment could decimate enemy lines and clear the way for infantry advances proved overly optimistic. Despite a relentless shelling campaign lasting days, much of the German defensive network remained intact. Barbed wire entanglements were only partially destroyed, and many German troops survived safely in dugouts that shielded them from the worst of the bombardment. When British soldiers went over the top, they were met with fierce, accurate machine gun fire and artillery counterattacks that inflicted devastating casualties. This painful reality forced a reconsideration of battlefield strategies. The commanders realized that piecemeal infantry assaults against fortified positions were not enough. Coordination between artillery, infantry, engineers, and new technologies had to improve. Communication challenges. Limited reconnaissance and difficulties in resupplying frontline units also hindered operations. The experience of the Somme highlighted that warfare was no longer about individual heroics or rapid maneuvers but about orchestrated, combined efforts that could break through seemingly impenetrable defenses. Among the most significant outcomes of the Somme was the introduction of the tank, a groundbreaking innovation designed to counter the deadly obstacles of trench warfare. The tanks, though primitive by later standards, represented a radical shift in how battles could be fought. These armored vehicles could cross difficult terrain, crush barbed wire, and provide mobile cover for advancing troops, potentially rendering entrenched defenses obsolete. Their first deployment at the Somme in September 1916 was limited and faced mechanical problems. But the psychological impact on both sides was undeniable. Tanks symbolized hope, a glimpse into the future of warfare where technology might finally tip the balance in favor of attacking forces. The Somme also accelerated improvements in artillery tactics. Commanders began to experiment with shorter, more intense bombardments designed to surprise the enemy and minimize the time defenders had to take cover. Artillery fire became better coordinated with infantry movements, with creeping barrages that moved forward just ahead of advancing soldiers to suppress enemy positions. These tactics, refined through hard experience, would become crucial in later battles, increasing the effectiveness of attacks and reducing unnecessary losses. Furthermore, the Somme underscored the vital importance of logistics and supply chains. Maintaining the flow of ammunition, food, medical care, and reinforcements to the front was a monumental challenge that required careful planning and innovation. Improved railway and road networks behind the lines were developed to support sustained offensives, and new methods for casualty evacuation helped save lives. The war was not just fought on the battlefield, but also in the ability to manage the complex machinery of modern warfare. On a human level, the battle's lessons fostered a deeper understanding of the psychological and physical toll on soldiers. Commanders became more aware of the need to rotate troops, provide rest periods, and address the mental health challenges that had become evident in the trenches. The recognition of shell shock as a genuine condition marked a turning point in military medicine and attitudes toward combat stress, leading to early efforts in treatment and rehabilitation. Despite the Somme's tragic losses and limited immediate success, the battle's legacy is one of adaptation and resilience. It was a turning point that forced the Allies to confront the realities of industrial warfare head-on and to innovate in response. The lessons learned on the blood-soaked fields of the Somme contributed to improved tactics and technologies that would eventually help break the stalemate on the Western Front and pave the way toward Allied victory. The story of the Somme reminds us that even in the darkest moments of war, human ingenuity and determination can shine through. It is a testament to the soldiers who fought not only against enemy forces, but against the very nature of modern conflict itself. Their sacrifices were not in vain, as the knowledge gained from their struggles helped shape the future of warfare and military strategy. If you want to explore more about the groundbreaking innovations and lessons born from the Battle of the Somme, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support allows us to bring these important stories to life with respect and depth. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you won't miss our future videos delving into the remarkable history of warfare and the brave souls who shaped it. Together, we honor their legacy and keep their stories alive. The Battle of the Somme stands as one of the most haunting symbols of the First World War, a stark reminder of the terrible cost exacted by trench warfare and the tragic futility of offensives that yielded so little ground for so much bloodshed. This colossal confrontation, fought amid muddy craters and shattered landscapes, revealed not only the devastating power of modern weaponry, but also the profound physical and psychological suffering endured by millions of soldiers. It is a story etched deeply into history, a story of courage and heartbreak, endurance and loss. Trench warfare at the Somme encapsulated the grim reality faced by men who lived and fought in conditions unlike any previous conflict. The endless cycle of bombardment, charge, and counterattack created an atmosphere of relentless terror. Soldiers confronted mud-filled trenches, where disease, cold, and hunger were constant companions, and the ever-present threat of death lurked around every corner. The mental strain was as severe as the physical, with countless men suffering from what was then known as shell shock, a condition now recognized as a form of post-traumatic stress disorder. The battlefield was not only a place of strategic importance but a crucible where the human spirit was tested to its limits. The Somme also laid bare the brutal nature of warfare during this era, the tragic reality that entire units, often composed of volunteers filled with patriotic zeal, could be decimated within hours by well-prepared defenses. The bravery of these soldiers, charging across exposed fields against machine guns and barbed wire, is a testament to human resilience. Yet it also highlights the harrowing futility of such tactics in the face of industrialized killing. The enormous loss of life, coupled with minimal territorial gains, shocked nations and altered public perception of the war, forcing leaders and civilians alike to reckon with the horrific scale of the conflict. Despite the sorrow and tragedy, the Somme also became a catalyst for change. The terrible lessons learned on its battlefield spurred innovations in military technology and tactics, including the introduction of tanks, improved artillery coordination, and a deeper understanding of the importance of mental health care for soldiers. These developments would influence the conduct of future battles and ultimately contribute to the Allied victory. The legacy of the Somme is therefore not only one of mourning but also one of adaptation and hope, the hope that such sacrifices might prevent even greater suffering in the future. As we remember the Battle of the Somme, we honor the memory of those who fought and fell, as well as those who survived but carried the scars of war for the rest of their lives. Their stories remind us of the true cost of conflict and the importance of striving for peace. It is through this remembrance that history continues to teach us, guiding future generations toward a world where the horrors of the Somme never repeat. Thank you so much for watching and taking the time to remember this pivotal chapter of history with us. If you found this video meaningful, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel to support more in-depth explorations of history's most important moments. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an update. Wishing you all a peaceful night and restful sleep.